Anyhow, so a lot has been said about Nuuvera already, and those of you who were listening to the panel earlier might have already heard some of the things that I'm about to say. So Nuuvera is a company that has been listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange on the 9th, thank you, on the 9th of January, that has announced on the 29th of January that it was being bought by Afria. We see this more as a merger than as an acquisition, because the two combined entity, so Afria, which is a Canadian cannabis company, and Nuuvera, will make it one of the largest groups in the industry in the world, not just in Canada, but in the world. So we believe that this will give us the opportunity to be one of the leaders across the world, because this is a sector that is becoming a huge opportunity for the companies that are involved in it. So I will not pitch you Nuuvera today, because it wouldn't make sense, because in a few days, most likely, the deal will complete, and so you should be looking at Afria, not at Nuuvera, as the way forward. But I will try and explain why this industry is an industry that it is interesting to invest in. The first reason is that the secular trend on legalization is absolutely evident. We've seen it in the past few years. Only a few years ago, there were 3, 4, 5 countries in the world where it was legal to use cannabis for medical purposes. In a matter of 4 years, we've now seen dozens of countries where it is legal or it is being legalized. So I can mention about 15 countries in Europe, 10 countries in South America, Canada, US, where 9 states have also legalized recreational use. South America, I mentioned. Africa is becoming possibly the largest producer of cannabis for medical purposes in the world in the coming 2 years. And Asia is beginning to look at it. The way that government approach this is that normally they take a 2 to 3 step approach. So they start looking at it from a political perspective. Why should I regulate? And they normally regulate because there is a popular demand and support for regulation of cannabis for medical purposes or for recreational purposes. In some cases, there is a legal reason also to do that. We've seen in Canada, for instance, the trigger initially was that there was a court case where a judge said that the state could not forbid an individual from using cannabis to treat his conditions. And that triggered the whole process. But what is the truth today is that what we're seeing is a clear trend for legalization of medical use, and recreational is coming along the line. So normally what happens, and this is something that someone who wants to invest into the cannabis space should look at and keep in mind, is that there are steps in the legalization process. Normally, at the beginning, we see in a given country CBD, which is one of the actives of the plant, of the cannabis plant, beginning to be used for medical purposes. And in some countries, that product, that active CBD, does not fall under any specific regulation. For instance, here in the UK, you can buy CBD-based products as a food supplement. In other jurisdictions, that is exactly the same. Spain, Italy, France is beginning to look exactly the same. That is normally the first step. The second step, which is the crucial part, is the medical legalization, or legalization of medical use of cannabis, which is, as I said earlier, beginning to spread across the world. Once that happens, normally we see the third step, which is governments start considering legalization of recreational use. It happened in the US. 9 states in the US today allow recreational use of cannabis. It is happening in Canada, where in September, October maximum, we will be able to, an adult person will be able to buy cannabis for recreational use. And we are seeing the same trend in Europe. So today, there are more and more states in Europe where there is a political discussion around the liberalization of recreational use of cannabis. Portugal, Spain, Italy, Holland, Poland, in all these countries and more, there are pieces of legislation in Parliament that are being discussed on the legalization of recreational use. Now, when you talk about opportunities, normally there's also a risk attached to it. And there is a risk attached to investing in the cannabis space, and that is regulations. So because it is, and it will be, a highly regulated industry, because we're talking about a product that is not a common product, countries, legislators, governments will want to have a strong control over these products. And therefore, when they come up with legislations and regulations, if they come up with some legislations or regulations that do not make sense from a business perspective, that's where the risk is. We do see now today already some countries where there are in place regulations for medical use, which do not really make total sense from a business perspective, because they are restrictive, because they don't allow to develop certain products. For instance, in Italy, you cannot sell an oil. You can only sell the plant, the flower, which is a strong limitation in terms of business opportunity. It is changing, and it will change, and we believe that there will be a harmonization across different countries, in particular in Europe. But as an investor, you should keep that in mind, and you should look at the regulations and the legislations in the different jurisdictions before making a decision whether or not it is sound to get into those countries. What we are seeing in terms of regulation is that what makes a difference is the standards that the companies apply to the medical products. The most important part is that a company applies the highest possible standard in the medical sphere, which is called GMP, Good Manufacturing Processes or Practices. If a company applies those standards, most likely that company will be able to ship its product across country, from one country to another, because that standard is recognized across jurisdictions, across the world. So that is a very important piece of a very important element to be kept in mind. Finally, I would say that there is one single thing that could change this industry to the better, even creating even a more amazing opportunity than the one that we have already today. And that is the World Health Organization, which oversees health, in generally speaking, across the world. They will launch a critical review of cannabis in June. A critical review means that a panel of experts will start looking into cannabis, its effects, the actives that compose the cannabis plant, and what the applications can be, and decide at the end of a process, which can take anything between 12 to 24 months, whether there is ground to recommend a descheduling of cannabis. If cannabis were to be recommended to be descheduled by the World Health Organization, it means that all of a sudden, from one day to the other, governments would be allowed to grant permissions and licenses to use cannabis for medical purposes, but also for recreational purposes, in a much simpler way compared to what is today. So if that happens, if in 12 to 24 months there is a recommendation to deschedule cannabis, the industry that we know today, which is already a tremendous opportunity, would multiply that opportunity by 10, 15, 20. The sky would really be the limit. So this will be my advice to you today. And if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to take them once we are finished with this. Thank you.